Hi, this is Michelle. We're here on Laptop Radio, and we have John Silvestro and Tony San here talking about Bitcoin basics in just a few minutes. They're pretty much ready, and I'm have to really think about whether I should start early or not. Maybe they can kind of tell some stories.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can tell you how I got into Bitcoin. It's kind of an interesting thing. So I heard about Bitcoin a long time ago, and I heard there was this weird thing going on the internet called Bitcoin, and it was worth as much as 50 cents, and then it got as high as like $5 at one point in time. And then it crashed, and then I heard it crashed and went back down to 50 cents, and I heard it went away, so I didn't pay attention to it. Well, about a year and a half later or something like that, I got a call from a friend of mine. I'm an engineer, by the way. I got a call from a friend of mine, and he asked me, hey, can you make me a Bitcoin miner? And I said, Bitcoin? I thought that crashed and died like ages ago. He said, no way, man. It's like $30 a Bitcoin now. So I said, what? So he said, yeah, man, I need a miner, and you do FPGA stuff, and I heard you can make me a miner. So I said, yeah, let me think about it. And I started looking at it, and then I got a call from another friend of mine, Jerry, who was involved in this thing called MIT Stanford Venture Lab. And they were looking at social finance, and they had this idea of investigating this thing called Bitcoin. So I said, yeah, I was going to do this miner rig for a friend of mine, and yeah, I can help you out with that. So Jerry and I got together, and that's how I met Michelle, actually, a while back.
So Bitcoin is really old to me and to us. So, if you have any questions, just tweet to us at KZSU. Stanford or laptop_radio, and we'll answer some of your questions. Tony was right. We worked on a virtual currency panel back in the day. So to us, I think virtual currency has been an old concept, but we love it and its payments. And having worked at PayPal for a whole long time, imagine me having dinner and hang out with these guys. I mean, they talk about payments all the time, and it gets very, very annoying. There's a difference between working on a startup where you spent, 20 hours, and then you hang out with your friends and they talk about payments and Bitcoin. I'm like, oh my gosh, I really don't want to hang out with them anymore. And so I'm just kidding.
I'm John Silvestro, and I met Tony and Jerry through a Bitcoin meetup a few months back. And I kind of come from a different background, which might be useful for your listeners that are a little bit newer to the space, because I'm a little bit newer to the space. I heard about it about 4 years ago, started looking into it about 2 years ago, and did the rabbit hole, I'd say about a year ago or somewhere in that neighborhood. And I don't come from an engineering background, so you have to really dumb it down for me. So for those people like me out there who are kind of idiots, I've gotten a really good hold on what Bitcoin is for the layperson, and it's been an incredible journey watching this thing, learning about it. I was somebody who come from a bit of an investment background, a couple other things, but now I've got my terminal open half the day, and I'm trying to mine other coins like Mimblewimble, and I'm on test nets, and these are things I didn't even know existed 6 months ago, and here I am in a whole new world. So it's been quite an adventure, and I think we're just getting started.
Yeah, so it's 2:15 right now. I think it's safe to formally start, and we were just doing pre-show stories. I thought it would be kind of fun. So this is DJ Michelle again, and we're talking about Bitcoin basics. So I'm just wanted to know, how do we invest in Bitcoin? How do we get started? And we have Tony San here and John Silvestro. I would like them to formally introduce themselves.
So my name is Tony San. I've got a variety of different backgrounds, but I've got primarily an engineering background. I understand a bit about cryptography as well. I've done some stuff in hardware in the FPGA field, and and I'm also interested in things like Venture Lab and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and I'm John Silvestro. I'm actually a Marine captain in the local area. I'm a recruiter and an aviator. But before my lifetime ago, I worked for a hedge fund and worked at venture capital. I worked for a small startup in New York City, all before I joined the Marine Corps. Currently working as an associate for Luna Capital, which is a crypto fund here in San Francisco. They're currently in their fundraising period, and they are looking to raise some capital to invest basically solely in cryptocurrencies. And I've been helping them just as an associate or an advisor.
So before we begin, I just wanted to ask you guys have any disclaimer on investing in Bitcoin?
This is not investment advice.
Yes, this is not investment advice. I am not, and John, we are not financial licensed people, so we are not financial advisors. So do not listen to anything that we say apart from entertainment value.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay, so let's just dive in here. What is a Bitcoin?
Okay, so I've been working on this. I'm going to take a crack at it, and then you can correct me, Tony, because you've got a better understanding than I do. But so what is a Bitcoin? So this actually, somebody asked me this yesterday. Explain it as if I'm 5 years old. I was like, okay, so if 2 5-year-olds are sitting on the playground and one of them has an apple and he gives it to somebody else, then that other kid now has an apple. The first kid no longer has an apple. Laws of physics do not allow for them both to have the apple at the same time. So that's in the physical world. That's easy. In the digital world, that problem is much harder. If I give a digital apple, or if you give a digital apple to a kid, I can make 1 million copies of that digital apple and I can send it anywhere on the planet. And it's almost impossible to tell which one was the original apple, who has the apple, are there 1 million of them, are there one of them, are there none of them, and it becomes very, very difficult. And this is known as the double spend problem. It's been a problem in cryptocurrency for a very, very long time. What Bitcoin does is, when I give you an apple, it sets up a network that allows for millions and millions of people to watch that transaction happen. Mm-hmm. So when that transaction happens, and then I try to spend that digital apple again. So now I give you a digital apple, and I go to try to spend that digital apple again. There are millions of people watching and say, no, we don't believe that. We confirm that first transaction. There can be no more transactions of that apple unless whoever has it now decides to spend it somewhere else. In our current system, we have a central banking agency, and the central banking agency has all of the apples. They keep all your apples. They've got yours in one basket. They've got somebody else's in another basket, somebody else's in another basket. And when you decide to spend it around, they take an apple from your basket, put it in somebody else's. And we pay them a very large portion of our money to make sure that is secure and accurate. It's about 1/3 of the total money in the world gets basically taken for that privilege of securing our money. And we've trusted that system for a very long time for a good reason, because it has worked. With Bitcoin, that allows us to circumnavigate that and circumvent that problem by doing person-to-person payment systems.
Well, it also has a lot more advantages than a central. It also has a lot more advantages than a central banking system as well, too. So, with a central bank, so for instance, if John was in, say, I don't know, Kansas, and I was here in California, and I wanted to send John an apple, I could actually go to my bank and ask to wire transfer, the apple to John, and the bank would start taking some information down and say, okay, it's like 4:30 now, so we'll do that tomorrow, and John will get the apple in a few days after it clears. So by doing this digitally through Bitcoin and things like that, it actually happens instantly. I can do it at 4 a.m. at night. I can decide, hey, John, I've been talking to you on the phone. I think I need to send you an apple. Have an apple.
Yeah, send me an apple, please. That sounds great.
There you go.
So I actually want those apples as well. If you can share that with me, I would be really, really happy.
Yeah, these apples are worth about $12,000 right now. So,
but I wanted to transition, since we're talking about Apple, on the significance of it. I think you mentioned a little bit about settlement. I do hate how banks takes like 3 days to settle. And it really doesn't make sense. If you own the money, the bank holds the money forever, and you can't do stuff with your money. You can't circulate the money because some institution basically wants it until they release the money, right?
Sure.
So why is Bitcoin or cryptocurrency important?
Yeah. So the nice thing is that I call it the monetary equivalent of the internet. So it changes like the internet changed the way we communicate and have access to information. This changes the way we deal with money. So with and to a larger extent, it actually changes more than just money. It changes the idea of trust. So the idea of me sending an apple to John is an idea of trust. I trust. So with a bank, I have to trust this third party to actually take care of everything for me. But with cryptocurrency and with Bitcoin, I don't have to trust anybody. I just have to know that John's wallet address, and I just send it to him.
So why do we trust John, and why not? Why don't we have to trust anyone? Where is that trust built?
So I'll give you an analogy that to help me understand. This came from Eric Boskel, who's runs a library called The Bitcoin, and his analogy is, let's say, Tony, where do you live right now? Do you live in a house somewhere, or an apartment?
Yeah, I live in a house in Sunnyvale.
So perfect. So you live in a house in Sunnyvale. So, I ask what makes that safe, right? So, the answer might be, it's got a lock, it's got an alarm system, and those make it safe. But in reality, those don't really make it safe, because if nobody's watching those systems and you have all day, you can break through that lock, you can break through the windows, you can steal all this stuff. If nobody's watching, nobody's paying attention, it doesn't make you any safer to have those security systems in place.
Right,
so,
but I also have neighbors too.
Well, so that I was going to get to that. There you go. Very good. So let's say somebody goes in and they start pulling your stuff out. Now, if your neighbors aren't watching, again, if nobody's watching, nobody calls the police, nobody sends help, all your stuff gets stolen. Bitcoin changes that by essentially giving us a system in which we can all watch each other all the time, and every player is incentivized to do the watching. It helps build the network. It helps create new things, or helps create security and value in the system. So there is a lot of very technical stuff that goes into this. Trust me, I have tried to dig into it. I understand some of it, very little of it, but I do understand that in essence is what Bitcoin does. It allows us to watch for everybody to watch everyone, and that makes it a trustless system, because with everybody watching, it's impossible to corrupt the system, one node at a time, like it would be in, say, the Equifax hack. Equifax is basically case in point for the reasons that blockchain is important. And Tony hit on the other ones, in the way the internet changed Hollywood with Netflix, or mail with email, travel agencies with Kayak, big box stores with Amazon, and all their manner of disruption. Bitcoin is that to the financial system. It is that in a nutshell. It will change the way that we handle, operate, and use money.
I wanted to discuss a little bit about blockchain, just for a few seconds, because I feel like blockchain is very important to Bitcoin. Yeah. So, Tony, why don't you talk a little bit about the blockchain and how that allows for transparency and how that is related to Bitcoin?
So, blockchain is the fundamentals of Bitcoin. It's what makes Bitcoin Bitcoin. A lot of people say that Bitcoin is actually the first application on this thing called the blockchain. So, the blockchain is this basically. It's a big chain of signatures. Like, for instance, I will write down a certain transaction, and I will have that notarized by something called a miner. And the miner signs it and says, I notarize it, this transaction is good, it's not a problem. Then somebody else like John makes another transaction. He tacks that at the end of the blockchain. And then the next miner comes along, and it not only notarizes John's transaction, it notarizes everything that happened before John. So over time, it builds up a large amount of trust. So, for instance, if you have like 5 miners sign something, it would be impossible to say this did not happen, right? So at that point, you have effectively something that is digitally permanent. And the interesting thing about the blockchain is it's replicated everywhere in every wallet. So so everyone has the same blockchain. If my wallet gets hacked, doesn't matter because the blockchain is open. What happens is that blockchain can be replicated everywhere. You would have to take out every single wallet in the world in order to destroy Bitcoin.
Right.
and that ledger, because so that ledger will always exist.
I remember the great crash in the United States, and it seems like there were...
Which one?
Oh my god, the Great Depression, guys.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking 2008. And I was, yeah.
Oh, 2008.
Okay, sure.
I didn't think...
87 or 77?
Yeah,
or?
so the 2008 depression, I was
Sure,
kind of
okay.
funny. I was actually investing in stocks at that time. I mean, I consciously did not go on vacation because I felt kind of bad for all the people who were laid off. But I did take advantage of the market, and I invested in a lot of companies because I thought, oh my gosh, stocks are on sale.
They are. They were totally on sale.
They were on sale. They were on sale. But I'm
So were
referring...
houses.
Yeah, so were houses at that time.
But there was an element of trust that you had that your broker would not go bankrupt. Because if your broker went bankrupt and you bought a whole bunch of stocks, you don't know where those stocks would be. So, though you weren't aware of it, you did have a certain amount of trust in your broker to be solvent.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Michelle, you were going somewhere. We're cutting you off.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about, I don't have a broker, so I'm just like,
Okay.
yeah, sorry. I usually, I handle stocks by myself, and I've,
okay.
yeah.
Cool.
So, yeah. But I'm just thinking about the Great Depression, and how if we had the blockchain or Bitcoin then, or blockchain even, then people won't lose a lot of their money, or there's some accountability at least.
Sure.
Yeah, it basically means that that the system can never be changed or unchanged, right? So, for
Yeah.
instance, if there was in the stock market, for instance, you have these things like flash crashes, right?
Absolutely.
And then someone decides, we're going to avoid all these transactions that took place after this point and undo that. You can't really do that on blockchain. Once a transaction's done, it's done.
Right. And Tony kind of hit on the blockchain, and the way that I think of it is, each block, think of it as, they call it a ledger. I didn't know what a ledger was. A ledger to me is essentially an Excel spreadsheet that has entries on it. So think of it as one Excel spreadsheet next to another, next to another, next to another. And the cryptography and the proof of work system basically pours, think of it like Jurassic Park with amber, right? So every time a new Excel sheet is put in there, they pour a little bit of amber over the entire thing. And then the next one, more amber. Next one, more amber. Next one, more amber. So the farther along you go down the channel, the harder and harder it becomes to crack through that amber at the beginning of the blockchain. The block 1, which is 146,000 blocks ago, something like that. That could be way off. Don't quote me. But that thing is covered in a very, very, very thick layer of amber. And every time you add a block, every 10 minutes or so, based on the difficulty of the proof of work, you end up with another layer of amber on top of it, which makes it the probability of cracking a blockchain past one block is, infinitesimal, essentially. And you'd have to have about, I think the last calculation, about $100 billion worth of computing power, which, as of right now, nobody has.
Nobody has,
Right.
yeah. So the cool thing is that you can put other stuff than Bitcoin, which is money or currency, onto this blockchain, right? So you can put things like the deed to your house, deed to a car, things like that.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I think your IP, just different things, whatever you want, contracts and such.
Sure.
Should we talk a little bit about hashes? Yeah.
We could, but
could.
that would probably take about a half hour.
That might be, it might be another day.
Yeah, we'll talk about hashes another day. I just thought, it involves two people. The hashes are really
Sure. I mean,
exciting.
the great thing about this topic is you could talk forever. I mean, we could talk
yeah.
about public keys and private keys and elliptical curve cryptography. And I mean, you just go forever on this stuff. And like I said, I went down the rabbit hole. I'm still in it. I don't know where the top is anymore. I hope there's a bottom somewhere, but I'm realizing that this just keeps growing and growing every day. And the knowledge base on it is impossible to keep up with.
So let's dive into if we're interested in Bitcoin and just getting a coin, how do we begin?
So that's a really good question. So there's a variety of different ideas and ways to begin. Some people think they have Bitcoin, but they don't really have Bitcoin. So that's one of the reasons why it's good to ask how to begin. So you begin by getting a wallet, and a wallet is downloaded to your computer or your smartphone or laptop or whatever, and it will have 0 Bitcoins. But it will have its own private keys in there. And then once you have a wallet, then you can transfer Bitcoins into that.
Tony, when you say private key, do you mean these long numbers?
250 quintillion, right?
They're long numbers that you shouldn't tell anybody, and that nobody knows what the number is except for you.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that everyone knows that they're really, really long. When I had a Ripple card with a Ripple coin, it was so long that I was just like, oh my gosh, do I really need to enter everything in there?
Well, so you asked about getting your first Bitcoin. So my friend Josh Davis, who was the original, he was, everybody has an origin story, how they first heard about Bitcoin or how they first seriously got into it. Josh Davis was mine. He was living off of Bitcoin in LA for a long time. People always ask, well, what can you buy with it? What can you do with it? And he's always my example. I mean, he lived off this stuff for 3 years, was able to pay, pay most of his bills and buy groceries and go on purse.io and bought stuff off of Amazon. So his recommendation was, well, you can give me cash and I will send you Bitcoin. That was the first iteration. That was the first Bitcoin I ever received was from him sitting in a bar in San Diego. But I would recommend for the people who don't own any yet and want to get some, right now, the easiest way is by far go to Coinbase.com, start an account. You can buy Bitcoin in 10 minutes.
Right.
There's other exchanges. Kraken is one of them. Gemini is another. For me, if you're looking to put in a lot of money very quickly, you're going to need to do a wire transfer from your bank to one of these exchanges. I recommend Gemini. They use a bank down in San Diego that's very good, and it was a very easy process for me and for some of the other people that I've been talking with. And I'm familiar with this because this is, some of this was in the last 6 months where I was going through this process. And actually, it was pulling my money off of, like you said earlier, off of Robinhood and off of TD Ameritrade or Scottrade or E-Trade, all these websites, that convinced me that Bitcoin was the future because I didn't realize that I didn't really have my money. It wasn't really mine. And with Bitcoin, it is, as long as you protect it correctly.
Yeah. So the important thing is that once you've actually got your Coinbase account or your Kraken account or whatever, you have a Kraken wallet, but make sure you transfer the Bitcoins to your own local wallet.
Yeah.
So how much amount should we invest in? I know that Bitcoin is like over 11,000 now.
Yeah, actually, we were going to do that. We forgot to do that. We were going to check what it was at the beginning and then check what it is at the end because it is approaching 12,000. So we can get an update right now and just see kind of where it's at. But yeah, it has been growing quite a bit. It's on GDAX, which is Coinbase's exchange account. It is currently at 11,736. 34.
So you can buy fractional amounts of Bitcoin. You don't have to buy one Bitcoin. That's the important thing.
Yeah, you can buy one 100 millionth actually. So point into 8 zeros after it.
So Tony, what is your first Bitcoin purchase and how was that like? What year was that?
So my first Bitcoin purchase was a while back. I got a wallet, so I knew how to do that, and I actually went to localbitcoins.com. So that's a website.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, where you give someone money, cash, and then you give them your wallet address, and they give you Bitcoins. And the very first transaction took a long while for me because the person who gave me the Bitcoins didn't put a mining fee in there, and a mining fee speeds up the transactions dramatically.
How much are those mining fees?
At the time, it was like a tenth of a millibitcoin or something like that, so it wasn't very much back then. So anyway, so I got some Bitcoin that way, and I knew the guy, so I did trust the guy. And he said, "You've got to." You can see the transaction on the blockchain, but it's not confirmed. And I didn't get a confirmation for like a whole day because he forgot to put this mining fee in there. So I was like kind of semi-nervous, but I did know the guy, so I was okay with that.
What kind of wallets do you have, Tony?
I'm kind of a hardcore guy, so I have Bitcoin Core, which is the basic wallet that you have access to the source code and you can see everything, and I compile it all myself. But I don't recommend that for everybody.
Yeah, that thing's great. It's got a lot of adjustments. You can do all kinds of things with it, but for the beginning user, probably not the best choice.
No, I'd probably ask John what kind of wallet he uses.
Yeah, it was kind of, I slowly realized that, quickly realized that keeping it on the exchanges was similar to keeping your money with a bank or keeping it with a central agency, and that you don't really have access to your private keys, so you don't really have access to your Bitcoins or your other cryptocurrency, whatever it might be. So there are a number of options. You can use a mobile wallet. I usually keep, maybe a couple $100 on my mobile wallet. I use Jax. Bread is another one. Blockchain.info has a good wallet that you can keep on your phone. So those are the mobile wallet options. Then there's desktop wallets. Desktop wallets give you a little bit more safety. You generally own your private keys with a desktop wallet, but it's still on a network. It still has access to the internet. Somebody with a Wi-Fi code, if you're messing with your Bitcoin on your desktop at a Starbucks or something, could possibly hack your computer and steal your Bitcoin. So you have to be really careful with that sort of thing. My recommendation, especially if you have, really, my recommendation is if you have any amount of cryptocurrency, is to use what's known as a hardware wallet. So there are a couple out there. The three that I recommend, or the three that I've seen. One is called KeepKey, which I really like. They use a program called Shapeshift, which was partly funded by a guy named Eric Voorhees, who's a very early Bitcoin adopter. Then there's the Trezor wallet. Trezor wallet's been around a little bit longer. Excellent product. And then my most recent one is a Ledger Nano S. So Ledger Nano S allows you to store not only Bitcoin. I mean, they all store multiple coins. Ledger Nano S gives you the most flexibility. They add a lot of different crypto assets that you can have on there. And when you have your crypto on a hardware wallet, it is a feeling of being a sovereign bank or a sovereign nation. It's really quite it's a good feeling. Other than that, you have paper wallets, which are secure. Basically, you can store it in a safe deposit box or put it in a chest and bury it in your backyard if you want. There's also head wallets or brain wallets. If you can memorize your private key, you can keep it in your mind. Andreas Antonopoulos is one of my favorites. He talks about, you could cross a border with $1 billion in your brain and nobody could ever take it from you. There's a number of different ones. My recommendation is definitely look into hardware wallets. They are going up in price. I noticed the other day that one on Amazon went from $75 to $125 because of demand. They are having trouble keeping up. This space is flooding with new people every day. 100,000 people on Coinbase almost every day these days. So.
Yeah. So the other thing is also a paper wallet. You can actually put your Bitcoin private key onto a piece of paper, stick it in a safe, never look at it, and you'll be good. No one can hack into that.
Okay, once you have the money in your wallet and you wanted to trade, for example, if you had a Bitcoin from a long time ago and you wanted to trade one share of
one coin.
Sorry. How would you approach that?
I can
Depends
touch on it.
What do you want to trade for?
Yeah, well, so there's a number of exchanges, right? There's exchange, and there are exchanges in every country. Well, not every country, but many, many countries. The ones that I use, Bittrex is a good one. Bittrex.com. Bitfinex is another one. I don't use that one, but I've heard good things. Binance is a Chinese exchange that has a lot of coins on it. Coinbase allows you to trade for a few coins right now. They're adding a couple coins, I believe, next year. Right now, Litecoin, Ethereum, and Bitcoin are the three big ones on that exchange. And so you can do it relatively. It's all about signing up and getting some Bitcoin on there. Make sure you get verified, and then trading it over. It's very similar to kind of like you were talking about before, an E-Trade account or Ameritrade or what have you. So there are many places that you can go and trade and speculate. If you are curious about coins, coinmarketcap.com, you go there. It will list all. I think there's 1,500, just 1,500 coins now on there, or crypto assets, I should say, spanning the space from smart contracts to tokens to all manner of things. And on there, you can click on a coin, and then if you click markets, it will show you exactly where it's trading, where you can get it. Liqui.com is another one. Anyway, there's thousands of them. So.
Well, which ones are the ones that you guys like?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. So Bittrex, Bittrex, Binance, and Bitfinex, I think, are the top three ones that I would recommend in terms of trading like really obscure altcoins. If you're looking to just go to Litecoin or Ethereum, then you can do that right through Coinbase once you get your first Bitcoin.
Yeah, I tend to like Croc and Gemini. So
yeah.
Okay, we have some questions from the audience. So what do you, John and Tony, recommend for the best combination of all coins to consider?
Best combination. You can go ahead. I
why don't I
definitely have
start off?
some. Yeah.
So it turns out a lot of people.
How much time we got? No. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, go ahead.
It turns out a lot of people have altcoin even though they're not aware of it. So Bitcoin is. So what happened was that as of August 30th, I think there was a hard fork in Bitcoin. So if you had Bitcoin before then, you also have this thing called Bitcoin Cash that you may or may not be aware of. Bitcoin Cash is right now worth about $1,500 a Bitcoin Cash. You also
or Bcash, depending on who you ask.
Right.
Bcash over here.
Yeah. So you've also got Bitcoin Cash, you got Bitcoin Gold. I hear there's a Bitcoin Diamond.
Bitcoin Diamond, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you now have all these other altcoins that are not worth they're actually worth something. So you could either trade them in for Bitcoin, or you could trade them in for other altcoins as well.
Yeah, I mean, so personally, if you're looking at altcoins, let's see. So this Bitcoin protocol, has really proven to be very good at one thing so far. I mean, there's all this hope and potential that it could do all these other different things out there, like IP, like digital security. Well, not security. Sorry, digital identification. These kind of things. There are all sorts of promises, just like there have been all sorts of promises of every new technology that's come along. And that's really what's important about this. This is a new technology. People want to put it into, and Michelle, you said shares earlier. People want to put it in that same sort of idea, and that it took me a while to understand. It's really not. It's a completely new asset, and it's a completely new technology, and that to me was a big revelation, right? So, but when it comes to altcoins, for me personally, if I invest in altcoin, it's usually going to be some sort of copycat of the Bitcoin protocol in terms of it is a currency that does cross-border payments, or has a token system that allows a little bit more flexibility, like allowing for what's a good one?
Litecoin.
Yeah, Litecoin. I really like Stellar. Stellar Lumens is one that was off of the Ripple. Off the Ripple blockchain, and it was founded by Jed McCaleb, who was the original founder of Ripple and Mt. Gox.
Yeah,
so
Mt.
he was the original Mt. Gox guy. Sitting in his basement 2 a.m. was like, I'm going to sell some Bitcoin. Creates Mt. Gox, sells $2 million of Mt. Gox in the first week, and gets a call from the FBI a couple months later and says, you know what, I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to sell it. Sells it to a man. Sells it to a man in Japan named Mark, and then Mark famously lets Mt. Gox flame out and gets hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin stolen, and they're still dealing with the fallout from that. But Jed McCaleb is very smart, very, very talented, and I think they have a really strong team at Stellar. I mean, there's a ton of them. I like Litecoin. I like Ethereum. I think again, I'm not an investment advisor. I don't want to pitch things that I own or don't own or otherwise. But there are a lot out there. I would say for people who are getting new in the space, just hold your Bitcoin until you learn a little bit more. Don't invest in anything you don't understand just because somebody told you to do it.
Right.
So we have a comment and feedback from an audience. It says, "Can you ask John if he's single? He has a sexy voice and so much coin knowledge."
Oh, Jesus.
Okay. All right. What's the difference between a coin and a token?
That's a lawyery type question, I think.
Why? This could be very factual, right?
Sure.
There's tokens.
So there's this thing called a Howey test. So actually you're going to have a guest next week on. I think his name is Neil.
Oh, we had Neil on 2 weeks ago.
Oh, you already had Neil on. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's the guy who I talked to about making sure that your tokens are tokens and not securities.
Right.
So.
I don't have a good answer for you for that. I mean, a lot of times they're interchangeable. Depends on who you're talking to, what they decided, what the marketing team came up with. So I don't have any insight on the token. I do see one. What does it say? How high would BTC go this year? How high in 2018? Oh man, it's funny. I was just looking at a conversation I had the other day back in October, and I was making a bet on the price with a friend, and I was woefully short. My timeline has shifted greatly to the left. Your guess is as good as mine. I say it all the time. This, it could go to zero tomorrow. This whole thing could blow up. Now, I don't actually believe that, but there is certainly a possibility that this whole thing is a mirage, and we're all going to wake up from this Bitcoin fever dream. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think there's a real case for.
So I think
you ahead,
stuff
Tony. Yeah,
will. So I think stuff will happen. So stuff has happened in the past. Like Bitcoin previously, I remember it had a high, like I mentioned, of $30, went down to like $5, and then went down to and then it came back, right?
So Tony, can you kind of tell us like the tentative dates when it went high and then it went low? I mean, I remember when the Winklevoss brothers came and spoke on our panel. It was like at 30 something, and their prediction was at 70. You know, of course, I don't know if they knew that this is going to be at over 11,000 today.
Yeah, they predicted 70 by the end of the year, and they talked to us around, I think it was March or something like that.
Yeah, 2013.
Right.
14,
By the end of that year, it got it to 1,200, so it went way past their prediction. And then it crashed back down to about 300 or so. So if you bought some at 1,200 and you see this crashing down to 300, you might have been very nervous. Well, a lot of people might have said, okay, this is the end of Bitcoin. But if you've seen crashes before, then you might decide then to buy some at that point. So I tended to dollar cost average, and I bought going down.
Good job, Tony.
So let me ask you guys. So if I'm risk averse, like I'm totally freaked out, because I think I've known certain people who invested in tech with their IRA, doing the bust. I think they basically lost everything, sure. Right? So if I'm risk averse and I wanted to invest in a few tokens or coins, or coins, what do you suggest?
I would say don't invest anything or once you invest something, just kiss it goodbye and be comfortable with that, and then come back a few years later and you may be very, very happy.
Yeah, I mean, I've been describing it as your light on fire money, money that you can burn and not have to worry about paying the bills. Yeah. People are talking about taking out their IRAs and 401ks and all that stuff. I mean, you're getting into a bit of a mania in that regard. I do think that Bitcoin, rather than the sort of the bubble diagram, where a lot of people want to compare it to the tulip mania, which the tulip mania was. Anyway, the tulip mania was not exactly the mania that we describe it to be. This all-encompassing of Holland. Every single person was buying tulips. It was not as big, but it is. People use it all the time as an example. That's what Bitcoin is doing right now. And when you look at the chart, it's screaming basically directly up and to the right, and has been for a good while now. We had a quote unquote crash back in September where it dropped from 5,000 to 3,000. Mm-hmm. Nobody remembers 5,000 right now. Right. So. And people are pouring in now, and so they're seeing all this up and to the right. It will correct. It's going to correct. But I truly believe we're seeing something similar to, more akin to an S adoption curve, technology S adoption curve. Because again, this is a new technology, it's a new asset class rather than a new stock or a new company. So you're seeing. If you look at Google searches over the last however many years, or you look at Facebook users, or you look at Netflix users, it has this S adoption curve. And, some of you can Google it if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about. But basically, it's a flat line at the bottom. It goes vertical for a couple of years, and then it kind of plateaus at the top once it hits its mass adoption. Right now, Facebook has over 2 billion users. They can add 100 million users a day. It's not going to make that much of a dent to their numbers, and it's similar with Bitcoin. The volatility will continue to decrease, which it has. We've seen it decreasing over the years. It used to drop 80-90% on a regular basis. We haven't seen a drop like that in a while. Fingers crossed that we're in a new paradigm shift. 30-40%, definitely, absolutely, you're going to see those going forward. But like a big boat. And I fly a big plane, so with us, I don't fly these little guys. I don't fly a jet. So like right now, I would say Bitcoin is like a jet. It's all over the place. It can move very quickly. It can go up and down and up and down and move all over the place. But eventually, it becomes a bigger plane, right? It becomes a bigger boat.
So right now, it's a very tiny boat.
Yes.
And if you look in the overall market, for instance. If you look at something like, I don't know, the gold market, right? You get $20 billion worth of gold being traded a day on a net basis. You get something like $5.4 trillion a year. Bitcoin is like a $200 billion entire market cap.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so it's very tiny, and it's just starting to get onto the Chicago Mercantile Exchange is starting to trade futures on it. So it's just starting. You
have I think 3 new. So what I think the Nasdaq is doing it in January. Right. CME is doing it this month. CBOE is doing it on Sunday. Right. So the futures, there's definitely some concern about the futures. We've seen it with the gold and silver markets in the past that the futures markets have artificially suppressed the price of gold and silver. There is some fear that they're going to try to artificially suppress the price of Bitcoin as well. Yep. I don't think it's going to go well for them in the long run, but in the short term, you could definitely see some negative price pressure from these future contracts.
Right.
And Tony knows a lot more about that stuff than I do. But just to sort of finish that on that boat analogy, the Titanic had a lot of trouble turning, and the bigger this boat gets, the harder it gets to turn. And so that's sort of what we're seeing now. The boat is getting bigger. It is still a very, very small boat in the ocean of money that is out there. But you could see it it will start to grow, continue to grow, and that volatility become less and less. Right now, 1,000-point swing is still about 10%. In 2, 3, 4, let's say, hypothetically it gets to $1 million a coin. Nobody cares a $1,000 swing, right? Nobody cares a $2,000 swing. Nobody cares a $10,000 swing. That's sort of.
But you might see a $20,000 swing at that point.
Sure, absolutely. And again, I mean,
and that's
that 20 to 30%, going forward is definitely possible. Yeah. Will we see 90% swings at that point? I don't think so. If it gets there, again, we're talking about the possibility of this being. One of the biggest use cases is store value, and a lot of people are starting to see that Bitcoin will be the store value for cryptocurrency. Which, there's an argument to be made that it could take over gold as a store of value. Right now, a lot of people use gold as a store of value. The market cap for gold is somewhere between $8 and $9 trillion. Bitcoin trades at about 200 billion right now. I think actually it's right up against the 200 billion.
Yeah.
And that you're talking about multiples on multiples to get to that price point. Again, not investment advisors here, but that is sort of the technology we're talking about.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, there was this stock called Berkshire Hathaway that I found out about.
Right.
And back then it was like, the most expensive stock in the planet and all that. So I looked at it as a kid and all that. And it was $5,000 a share of Berkshire Hathaway. And I thought, man, that is one very expensive stock. So I at that point said, oh, okay, I'm going to look at it. And then I said, I'm never going to buy this because it's way too expensive. Well, I looked at it like 10, 15 years afterwards.
Right.
It was $100,000 a share for Berkshire Hathaway.
I remember I was just learning about stocks. I remember being like, oh, what's the most expensive stock out there? And I saw this Berkshire Hathaway. I was like, oh, what's that? I think it was trading at the time at like $60,000 or something.
Right.
And now Berkshire Hathaway trades at $233,000, $260,000 a share.
So these valuations are not out.
They're not out of control. No. And if you were Warren Buffett's buddy back in the '60s, you could have bought Berkshire Hathaway at pennies. Yeah. And there are many multimillionaires, quiet multimillionaires living in Oklahoma, living in Omaha right now, who are, giving away hundreds of millions of dollars upon their death because they were friends with Warren Buffett back in the day. And so, you could see something similar with this. And I did make a Titanic reference earlier. That was a bad choice. I don't think this is going to sink. Let's say the Queen Mary instead. She's still around, I think. So.
Let's talk about conversion of the Bitcoin out of the digital wallet into physical wallets. How's that process like? Is it pretty smooth?
What do you mean into a physical wallet? You mean into U.S. dollars?
Correct.
Oh, yeah. So that you go to an exchange. You sell your Bitcoins for U.S. dollars, then you have them wire transfer that to you, and you pay the tax man. Make sure you pay the tax man for any gains that you have.
Yep, always pay the tax man.
Yeah. Because chances are you will have gains.
So you asked about selling your Bitcoin back into U.S. dollars or other cryptocurrency assets.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that the whole process is complete.
Sure.
They know about Bitcoin, They get a wallet, they trade, and then they sell it, and then the money goes into their bank. And how much money do they have to pay in terms of fees? Those bank fees?
Yeah, it's basically just wire transfer fees that you would pay. So whatever your standard wire transfer is, I think it's like
$20,
$25.
Right? Yeah. But if you're doing ACH, I don't even know if there is a transfer fee.
It's like $3, but you got to wait 3 days. So why bother?
But I would say. So again, to hit on selling your Bitcoin, if you don't have to, so there's a meme out there called HODL, HODL, and people have T-shirts and bumper stickers and stickers on their computers that say "HODL your Bitcoin" or and it comes from a late night rant on Bitcoin, our Bitcoin from Reddit years ago. Guy was drunk, drinking whiskey, and was mistyping hold your Bitcoin, and realized about halfway through and said, I don't care that I'm saying hodl your Bitcoin, hodl your Bitcoin. So that's where it comes from. So when you see people saying hodl your Bitcoin, that's what it is. And Jameson Lopp, who's a guy I follow on Twitter, really bright developer, one of the Bitcoin core guys. He has a thing that I'll quote to you now that it's on his Twitter page, but it says, "Welcome to Bitcoin, newcomers. Here is your frequently asked question. Question 1, who should I trust? Answer, nobody. Question 2, when should I sell? Answer, never. Question 3, is Bitcoin dying because blank? Answer, no. Question 4, what have I gotten myself into? Answer, nobody knows. And how do I learn more? Then he has a link, which, if you guys are interested, Jameson Lopp or at Lopp on Twitter, he has one of the more all-encompassing knowledge bases in the space. He has a great page that has everything you'll ever need to know. It's where I got that Apple analogy that I used earlier in the page. And
I think everybody's just using Apple analogy. So when we were speaking about ICOs, we were talking about Apple coins and apples and Apple.
Yeah, that's why I brought Warren into it.
Yeah.
right. Yep.
It was different.
So we have another question from the audience, and the question is, can you assign a beta to Bitcoin?
Beta, as in beta for the stock market, it's a different idea. The thing is that because there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins, it's not like a stock in a company where you can actually issue more shares, where you can have splits and all this stuff. So basically, the amount of Bitcoin is fixed, but the amount of people who want to get into Bitcoin is not fixed.
Yeah, that's right. 21 million is the cap. It runs out in 2140. And there's a whole bunch of other things that go into that, but there's also a lot of estimates that almost 25% of the world's Bitcoin has already been lost. So it's very possible that there only exist maybe 17, 18 million ever in circulation.
Yeah, right now there's about 16 million in circulation.
Yep. But again, maybe a quarter of those have been lost. So it could be down to 14 million.
Right.
In the end, every millionaire in America can never own a single Bitcoin.
Correct.
Every millionaire in the world can't even come close to owning a single Bitcoin.
But you can own fractions.
You can always, yes, absolutely, you can own fractions. And you can own, like I said, 100 millionth of a coin. It's known as Satoshi, named after the pseudonymous founder of Bitcoin. I say founder with air quotes. But Satoshi Nakamoto wrote the original white paper back in 2009. He is, for lack of a better word, the creator and the founder of it. He was around for a number of years answering emails. The interesting thing about him is if you look back at those emails, there was not a single typo in almost 20,000 pages of emails, transcriptions and otherwise. And then eventually one day he basically said, okay, you guys got this, and disappeared from the planet. And nobody's heard from him since. There's a lot of speculation on who it could be. In the end, I think it's great that we don't know who it is. I think it's a fantastic thing that he did or they did, depending on which theory you ascribe to. But I think he has really done a service to the world in terms of making himself a non-face. And I think that's an issue with some of the other coins like Ethereum with Vitalik. But.
Yeah, I think it's good that you can't say this one guy actually created it
right. Because what if he gets hit by a bus? Tomorrow gets hit by a bus, and then, oh God, is this going to fall? Is it going to collapse? And the answer is no, because he created this brilliant system, which was actually retrograding of the technology. Generally, engineers, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but generally engineers try to find efficiency as much as humanly possible in any system, right? That's the goal. Whether you're creating a new program or you're working on, for me, I did a lot of Excel stuff, so I was always trying to create efficiencies and automate it and what have you. But eventually, that's what you're working on. And so that's what you're working on is to create more efficiencies. The brilliant thing about Bitcoin is it came along where there was enough computing power to do extremely efficient things, but the brilliance of it was actually making it less efficient. It's a very inefficient process that secures Bitcoin. And we can get into the energy usage and things like that, and that's definitely a concern. I don't know how much time we have, but I guess we can kind of dive into whatever people are asking about now.
Yeah, so there's another question. Can Bitcoin be willed to beneficiaries easily?
So I think it can be very easily willed, because basically all you have to do is give them a wallet and transfer it into their wallet, and there you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So there is this other thing called Ethereum, believe it or not. So Ethereum allows for automated contracts. So you can have something which determines that if you are alive or dead, and if it determines that you're dead, it can transfer bitcoins automatically as per your desires.
Yep.
But if you're using Coinbase, for example, which I think a lot of beginners use, is there like a slot where you say, hey, I want my beneficiaries to be Jill Smith? Or do you just basically put Jill Smith's email address on there? Or do you I guess people can put it on their will.
If you have enough Bitcoin on Coinbase, that you're worried about whether it's going to get willed to your kids or something, then you're doing it wrong.
Take it off.
It should not be on there. If you have a little bit on Coinbase and you're not worried about losing it or what have you, then that's fine. But if you have enough Bitcoin on there where you're worried about whether or not it's going to get left to your children in your will, then you really need to talk to an expert to help you figure out how to better secure your money. And then you can set up multi-sig wallets. You can set up a seed wallet. You can give your seed wallet, your seed to your wallet, to your kin, so that if something happens to you, for instance, I've been lucky enough to get my parents involved, which, by the way, we were having this discussion earlier. If you're trying to get your parents involved, talk to your mother first. We've noticed there's been a bit of a block by fathers in the space. Fathers who are of a certain age are sort of like, I don't know, I'm too old, I don't know what this is, I don't get it. Moms love their sons, they love their daughters. They're willing to listen to you, and that has been the case with us for sure. So
I just feel like every time I'm talking to somebody about ICOs or Bitcoin, I don't think they kind of get it. I mean, my nephews certainly do, because they started thinking about things digital things, and living in digital world in their physical mind when they're young. So they understand virtual coins.
Yeah, it's natural to them.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So and a funny story about that exact thing, which is so a buddy of mine has a 5-year-old, and he was on his phone the other day, and he goes, okay, hang up the phone, and he looks at him like, what? He says, okay, hang up the phone, and so he turns the phone off, and he goes, Dad, why do you call it hang up the phone? Think about that for a second. You got a little red button on there. You don't hang it up on anything, right?
And so
these kids are growing up in a digital world, and they're not people. Children who are born today are not going to know, currency in the way that we do. They're going to know it as Bitcoin or some other protocol, whatever it is. They're going to know digital money, and that's all they're going to know. And that is a profound statement. I realize that, but I do truly believe that is where we're headed. Digital world needs digital money. It's one of the last frontiers that we haven't been able to crack. And Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, these crypto assets, they are the future of that digital world.
Yeah, I think what is interesting is, you guys remember Second Life?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where you actually create virtual life. Virtually. Yeah, you create virtual life virtually. And, there's certain coins there as well, right? But now it's just gone real. It's really real.
Oh, it's very real. You can buy houses, you can buy cars with it, and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Real cars, real houses. Yeah.
So if I wanted to learn or tell my grandparents about Bitcoin, so that they're more comfortable, where should I begin?
Wow, that's an interesting
deep question.
Grandparents. Yeah. I mean, parents is one thing. Grandparents is going to be, at least for me. I mean, my grandmother, she's great. She's on Facebook. I get messages from her sometimes. It's incredible. It blows my mind every time I get an email and that sort of thing from her.
Well, grandparents have a lot of time to read.
I don't know if I would. So they're a great book. I mean, the book that I love is Internet of Money by Andreas Antonopoulos. It's basically a collection of his talks.
Isn't that a little bit too technical for him?
Well, the Internet of Money is not. Mastering Bitcoin certainly is.
Okay, yeah.
Is there a Bitcoin for dummies or something?
I'm sure there is. I think Internet of Money kind of gets you gives you an aha moment. It doesn't necessarily explain it that well. There's so many great resources out there on the internet in terms of YouTube videos. There's a Bitcoin blockchain. There's a Bitcoin Blackboard series, which is where I learned a lot about it. There are, there's I go back to Jameson Lopp. He has some great stuff on his. If you go to his Twitter account, you click on that link, or I think actually you posted it on your Facebook, right? Or on LinkedIn.
I did.
So it's one of the first ones on there, Everything Bitcoin, and you can kind of just go through those links and kind of learn it. I think a lot of people had that conversation over Thanksgiving. I think we saw the great Thanksgiving bull run of 2017 this year. With Friday, Coinbase almost fell apart because so many people were opening new accounts after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it was 100,000
I think we almost broke the Coinbase.
Yeah,
internet.
almost broke the Coinbase internet. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that there are if somebody is truly interested, and that's really what it comes down to, is that you have to have somebody who is a willing participant to listen. Because a lot of people, I've had conversations before, people are very dismissive. They hear, oh, that's money for criminals, that's money for ransom, that's money for hackers, that's whatever. And you're like, yeah, but it's more than that.
So there's two really good things that you can do, because the people we know actually attribute less capability to us. They don't like to think of like your friends won't think of you, John, as a genius.
Sure.
You are. All right.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony.
Who knows? I don't know. But they will
I'll
think
take it.
But they will think of other people as being very smart. So if you bring people to a Bitcoin meetup, then they can learn about Bitcoin from a variety of people. So the light came on for me when I went to my first Bitcoin conference, actually.
Oh, nice.
And
When is that, Tony? I mean, I've never been to a Bitcoin conference.
they had one in San Jose just before the VLab event.
No, there was Scaling Bitcoin, which was Stanford about a month ago, although that one was more for hardcore developers and that sort of thing. But these meetups are so great, and I definitely stress that. Now, we're in Silicon Valley, so everybody's listening here has access to the same thing we do.
But these conferences are amazing because
they really are.
Because they have finance people.
Right.
So they don't just have people who are like. So I figured Bitcoin was
But
just.
don't they charge like 800 to 1,000? I really don't understand.
you can go to a free meetup. I mean, anytime, right? I go. That's how I met Tony and Jerry. I was at a blockchain meetup down in Sunnyvale, and I met two nuclear physicists. And I met Edward, who's our other buddy, who is just a jack of all trades, Thomas Jefferson type. And every time you go to one of these, you meet some other genius out there, whether it's an MIT developer who just graduated from college, or Britt Young, who's one of the guys at Stellar, or Lightyear, I should say. He's a former Navy intel officer who I connected with through my military network. There are people everywhere. Eric Voskel, who I mentioned earlier, he's a former naval aviator. And now he's a genius developer for Bitcoin and Bitcoin Core. And then I met this guy, Mikhail, at one of these Bitcoin conferences. He lives in Hong Kong. He's from Sweden. I mean, the people you meet are just, it's and especially here in Silicon Valley. We are very lucky to be here. There are a lot of very smart people working on it. People come from all over the world to work on it here. Hopefully we keep those B1 visas
And these conferences
going
actually
so that we
happen
can
all
keep
over
those
the
people
world.
coming. But
It doesn't just happen
it's not
here.
just here.
So it happens in New York. It happens at all the major metropolitan centers.
I think if you live in the Midwest, you can basically create your own meetup or just watch YouTube channel.
Sure. Well, and I mentioned earlier my friend Josh Davis. He lived in Utah, and every time he would go out there, he would try to convince somebody else to take Bitcoin. He's like, "I need to buy this. Hey, do you take Bitcoin? What's Bitcoin? Oh, okay, let me teach you." And you can do that now. You can go and I bought cufflinks with Bitcoin a couple weeks ago.
Nice.
I think we should do an experiment where all three of us basically live for 1 month just with Bitcoins and see what happens.
Okay.
Excluding rent. I mean, that would be pretty interesting. Yeah. I think that the money in Second Life is called Linden dollars.
Yeah, I have
Linden dollars? Okay,
Yeah.
Linden dollars, yeah.
I have automatic payments that take care of everything for me. So
Yeah.
It's
Well,
not
and I'd like to,
Well, that's why I call it an experiment. It's an experiment.
Well, there are people out there doing that for sure. Like I said, a good friend of mine, the guy
or at
who
least for lunch.
the guy who yeah, how about an hour on Bitcoin? There we go. That one's easy. But yeah, like I said, my good friend, he was. I will say this is very profoundly changed my life going into this world. I'm doing things now that I would have never done otherwise.
Yeah, Kashmir Hill actually did this experiment. She was from the Forbes magazine reporter who took care of our VLab.
She was our moderator for the
Yes.
VLab event. If you guys go to YouTube and look VLab, we did a virtual currency panel like back in the days. That one was really good. The Winklevoss brother was there. I think I met people from Ripple and Coinbase there, and it's certainly not really the beginning of Bitcoin, but maybe just a little touch of it at
close
that
to it.
time.
Yeah, the talk they gave was really good. They had Fred Ursham there. They had a bunch of guys who actually talked about what Bitcoin is, what mining is, and you had the the Winklevoss brothers, who brought a lot of humanity into it.
Yeah, and I remember in 2012, 2013, I met people who mined Bitcoins with computers and CPUs and things like that. So, and it takes forever. They usually have like their computer running all night. I thought that was kind of funny, actually.
Yeah, and I have a friend of mine who was living in LA at the time, and he had CPUs running or CPUs running in his room so bad that he was just basically naked in there with a sheet and trying to like stay comfortable. It was so damn hot in his apartment, just mining Bitcoin back in 2010.
How did he afford the electric bills?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't have an answer to that one. Who knows?
So there is a Bitcoin for Dummies by Wiley Brand.
Okay, there you go.
Bitcoin for Dummies, Wiley Brand.
And that's another great thing about this community is people are so willing to share information. There's no like close to the vest. There's no reason not to share it. It is a very open community as long as you're curious. If you're not curious and you come into this community, people won't give you the time of day. And that's been that's I think has been my best skill or my best trait is that I'm just as curious as I can possibly be, and people are willing to spend hours with me and just talk me through things. And like we're doing here today, I'll stay here for 4 hours and talk about Bitcoin. And I love it. So
the other thing is, if you haven't seen a video by Andreas Antonopoulos, you should definitely look up any of his videos.
Literally any of those videos
on
for
YouTube.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met him before. He's really cool.
Yeah, he comes to the Plug and Play meetup here on Bitcoin, which was the very first meetup. But he often gives these talks to, like, for instance, the central banks in Europe and all that.
Yep.
He gave a talk to the Bundesbank. But before his Bundesbank talk, he came to Silicon Valley to our meetup and actually did a pre-talk to us to prep him for that Bundesbank talk. So we kind of got a free talk.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring up something. We hit a little bit on the use cases of Bitcoin and what it is and how it works and that kind of thing. I guess we kind of talk a little bit about each use case, some of the use cases of it, that kind of thing. Another aha moment for me was, we're lucky, right? We live here in the United States. We have access to great technology. We have access to very secure banking system. We have access to all this first world banking that we don't have to worry about our government necessarily
we don't need
hyperinflating.
Here.
Yeah, we don't need Bitcoin here. Well, depending on who you're talking to. But I think the world needs Bitcoin. But
the world needs Bitcoin for sure.
But we can, like you said, we can get away with using the traditional banking system.
Yeah, US dollar sign.
But there are a lot of places in the world where that is not the case. We're seeing it right now in Zimbabwe. We were seeing it in Venezuela. We've seen it in Argentina. There are over 185 currencies in the world, and every year between 5 and 10 of those will go to zero. They will hyperinflate to nothing. And
right. A few years ago, it was
Tony, you own $1 trillion, right? $1 trillion in Zimbabwe dollars. Is that right?
Yeah, a long time ago, I gave a Bitcoin talk at the Plug and Play meetup, and I brought a $100 trillion note.
$100 trillion note. Yeah.
You know what is so?
He's a $100 trillionaire. Did you know that, Michelle? We're sitting next to a $100 trillionaire here.
Yeah.
First in the world.
You know what is so interesting though is like in 2012, 2013. I don't know. I think I must have quit my job at PayPal like in 2012 maybe 2012, and I was thinking how like all these startup founders, how they wanted to raise money, like what if they buy like $1,000 of like Bitcoin in 2012, 2013 or even before, and then they can just sell their
that
Bitcoin.
would probably be worth something like 20-30 million today.
Yeah,
easily.
Is that crazy? Does that sound reasonable? Is that nuts or what?
Again, I mean, no, it doesn't. But okay, so this was another. So venture capitalists are actually very familiar, or I should say, angel investors are very familiar with this sort of volatility, right?
Yeah.
If I'm an angel investor, I'm investing in an idea, and one day that idea could be worth $100 million to people, and the next day it could be worth 10 million, and it goes up and down and up and down. And we as the normals, I'll call us, us as the non-investing class, we're on the right side of that, which is this gray veil, which we know is the IPO. So when Google comes out with an IPO, we don't see all that volatility that happened to the left of that gray veil, right? So they come up with the idea, they pitch it, it goes through academia, it becomes an idea, they put it into place, first angel investors. Boom. So now you've got some money in it, and then they go up. You got your Series A, your Series B, your Series C, your Series X, all the way out, what have you, and then eventually they decide to go IPO. So now they go to the banks and say, okay, Goldman, we want you to underwrite this and take us public. And so the banks say, okay. They take a big chunk out of it. They take out some volatility as well, and eventually they go IPO. And we still see some volatility post IPO for sure. I mean, Google. It's been pretty much up and to the right from day one. It IPO'd at $100 a share, which I think adjusted now.
It was 85 actually.
Was it 85? Oh, right.
Yeah,
but I think the first
Dutch auction.
But I think the first trade was $100. So it jumped straight up $15, and then from $100, it doubled all the way out. Now it's worth, I think, trade adjusted, it's worth $2,000 or something like that, and then they've cut it back down and what have you. So we, as the normal population, are not familiar with seeing all that volatility to the left of that gray veil. For the first time ever, we are seeing it with Bitcoin. And we're also seeing the creation of a technology at the exact same time, and everybody in the world is watching. You think about the internet. The beginning of the internet was what, 1976? Is that about right? Late 70s?
Depends how you define it.
Okay, well, that first signal sent from Berkeley to Stanford,
public.
right? So,
so when it goes public was the 1990s.
So, well, right. Okay, so there was 14, 15 years of development that nobody was watching. Nobody cared. Right. A bunch of engineers talking to each other on these chat boards and sending signals and working on the on the Department of Defense computers. And nobody was watching. Nobody cared. It was like, oh, there's this thing called the internet. I had an Apple IIe way back in the day. I was growing up. I didn't know what the internet was until I got Prodigy or Netscape, and then eventually AOL. And then I got AOL, and I was like, oh, okay, so this is the sort of internet. And then eventually, the internet really grew up in the mid to late 90s.
Oh my God, remember those AOL signups?
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
GZA1 was still my original sign up.
You have to wait forever.
Yeah, and you got to hear 56K phone lines, and you got the crashing Darth Vader, all that stuff. But we're watching that in real time with Bitcoin. This is a new technology that we all get the chance to sit front seat and watch. And so you're seeing the polarization, you're seeing the politics, you're seeing fights between Roger Ver and Jihan Wu and Andreas Antonopoulos and Ari Paul, who's an investor at Block Tower, and all these guys out there, these big names that are sort of fighting for the future of this thing, and it's all happening in real time.
You're actually
on Twitter.
You're actually seeing what would happen in the inside of a company when people decide where to go for a particular thing. You might have different factions, different groups. They all want the company to succeed, but in different ways. That's the whole thing.
Right.
So let me ask you guys a question that I see from social media. Are there any community organizations other than meetups that promote Bitcoin and education?
I think it was educate noobs, I think is he looking for. Newbies. Yeah, I really think that meetups are great. I can't really, VLab, VLab does a thing on it every once in a while. You guys did it like 5 years ago or something, right?
Yeah, it's every once in a while.
I think there's probably going to be another one this year. We were talking a little bit about.
Well, I'm doing an ICO one on February 20th for Venture Lab, and ICOs are basically initial coin offerings.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. Tony and I are working on an ICO, right, Tony?
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah.
Eventually.
We're not going to talk about that.
Eventually, but you guys can. I don't think you want to talk about that right now. So besides Meetup, YouTube, right?
Well,
YouTube.
Great community. For me, I get most of my information off Twitter, honestly. I didn't use Twitter before I got into cryptocurrency. I had an account like 5 years ago, but I never used it. And now that I'm on Twitter, I get a lot of really good news, really good information on Twitter about what's going on in the community, what's happening, what ICOs are coming out, those sort of things. I don't focus a ton on the ICOs, but it is a really interesting space. And again, I say to people who are just getting into it, be careful when you're thinking about ICOs. Don't jump into that space until now. There's money to be made. This is, people want to consider this an investment. It's really a speculation. We're still in the speculatory period of this. It's one of the network effects that Trace Mayer, again, another voice in the Bitcoin space, who is excellent. Andy Hoffman is another one. But Trace Mayer, he has been in this since it was 25 cents. He's genius in this space in terms of his understanding of Austrian economics and the ideas that we can live a different way and another way.
That's another rabbit hole, is the Austrian economics one.
Right. So, again, I know. I'm reading Rothbard right now. It's blowing my brain. So,
I just went to the Berkeley blockchain meetup. Or Berkeley,
Nice.
Blockchain by Berkeley. And I think last week there was a conference on ICOs, and I think the SEC was there. They're still learning from the community, and they're still making decisions about initial coin offering, which is an ICO. So, I think we have the community and the government still making decisions on where we're going to head to. And
Sure.
so then I think now is probably the best age to, I think their email for fintech related event, I'm not promoting them, just giving out information, is really fintech@sec.gov. So if you have questions about ICO, they wanted to hear from the community, I think.
Yeah, the
Just my
government's
personal opinion.
Yeah, they're in a weird spot. They have to. They don't want to destroy this technology or squash it because, as far as they're concerned, it could be the next big thing, and they don't want to be seen to be squashing that. At the same time, it's also gives up a lot of control on their part.
Yeah, I mean, let's say
Yeah.
just for argument's sake, let's say Bitcoin does go to $100,000 or $1 million a coin. If your government doesn't decide to invest some of their GDP into that, they're going to be left behind by nations that did, and
Right.
nations like Japan,
China.
Australia is doing a little bit of it. There are some cryptocurrency, sovereignties that are thinking about taking it as taxes. If the U.S. decided we're banning Bitcoin and we're not going to allow you to pay your taxes in it or invest in it or otherwise, there is a very real possibility that they'll be left behind by the rest of the world.
Well, the other thing is, it could bring us out of. It could be the next thing that brings us out of the next recession, right? So you want to make sure that you have that capability within your economy to grow.
There's a philosophy and a politics behind this that we definitely do not have time to get into today. Because it goes into a very deep rabbit hole, and honestly, I'm still sussing out my own feelings on it and how I see the future and how I see the world dealing with the possibilities of this. If it becomes what it could become, if it takes over a large chunk of the money supply of the world, it changes the way that we operate local governments, federal governments, nation states, central banking, regular banking. All of those things change in a very profound way. It's a new.
I think
it's a new paradigm.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm ready to talk about it today, but I would, definitely we could definitely have another discussion on that some other time.
Yeah, I think the blockchain is disrupting a few industries right now, and I'm excited about it.
Well, the other thing is some very large players want to get in on it as well too, right? I mean, you've got Blythe Masters who left J.P. Morgan, left
Mike Novogratz, another J.P. Morgan guy.
Yeah, and started started Digital Asset Holdings, a small little tiny company.
Ari Paul, another one who left the space. The Luna Capital that I'm working with right now, they're a bunch of venture capital people who've been into crypto for the last 4 years. They're very knowledgeable in the space. They know a ton of the ICO creators, and they're deciding, we have an edge here. We have a possibility to really capitalize on our knowledge and our connection with this network, and we're going to go into that space instead of in venture capital. And I think that it's really important to understand how disruptive this could be. Not to scare anybody, because I know my parents were definitely like, "Wait, what are we talking about?" So, but
it's very empowering too.
It's very empowering. I will say personally, having my own money in my own hardware wallet feels very right. It feels good.
So let me ask you guys a question. I think when I first invested in the stock, I took $1,000, and so what I did was I purchased Amazon.
Nice,
with $1,000, and it was really back in the days, and I thought, I always support digital commerce, because I believe in the internet, and I think for a long period of time, I consciously shop online. I know it sounds really, really weird, and this is before e-commerce is popular. So just if I have $1,000 today in 2017 and only $1,000, what is your personal opinion about what I should invest in terms of what kind of coins, and how much, and just practically
so we're talking crypto. We're talking crypto assets only, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, it also depends. I mean, you Michelle, have a certain financial capability. There are some people to whom $1,000 is nothing. There are some people to whom $1,000 is everything.
Yeah, but
you're saying just if you have $1,000,
I'm just saying that $1,000 neutral, right? Without any judgment. Like,
I'm not an investment advisor. Yeah. If you don't own any crypto assets, I think Bitcoin. I can't recommend Bitcoin enough because I think that it is so. Right now, the thing that cryptocurrency does is it creates a secure and decentralized ledger. Bitcoin is by far the most decentralized and the most secure. People are complaining about the transaction fees, but that's because you're paying for the most secure. You're paying for a premier product as opposed to some of these other ones that are out there. And it'll plug you into a network that all of a sudden you'll start to look at it. You'll start to think about it. You'll start to read about it and understand it better. And then when you do understand it, your Bitcoin will be worth double what it was when you bought it. And then you can go buy other things. That's my 2 cents.
But why Bitcoin over Ether?
So Bitcoin is basically the safest of all of the cryptocurrencies. So, and it also, to me, I think if you have money that you want to spend, it's a question of how you feel, to be honest, right?
Yeah.
Because if you bought it at $1,000, let's say you spent all your $1,000 on Bitcoin, you bought it, I don't know, a tenth of a Bitcoin now, and let's say it dropped to I don't know, $8,000 now per Bitcoin. Then your $1,000 is worth $800. You're going to be like, oh man, I could have waited and bought some more.
Yeah, right.
So it depends how you feel. If you're comfortable with that, spend it all now. But on the other hand, you could spend like $500 now.
Yeah.
Wait 6 months and then buy some. Wait 3 months and then buy some more. Then it may drop or it may go skyrocketing. But in either case, if you spend the whole thing now, you'll be. Part of you might have buyer's remorse. Part of you might not. Part of you might say, "Oh, gee, I should have bought it back then when it was only 11,000."
And Carter Thomas is another guy that I follow on Twitter. He says, and I totally agree with him, and I've been saying this for a very long time. Is it's not when you bought, it's the decision to buy. It doesn't really matter. I mean, yes, it could matter, and Tony Robbins talks about this in investing. If you look at the history of the stock market, in a given year, if you bought at the top of the stock market versus the bottom of the stock market, your expected gain in returns over the course of 5 years is only 10% more than those who bought at the bottom. So in the end, it really matters, okay, did you buy or did you not buy? Right. And then like Tony said, you can do a cost average buy, set up a weekly or monthly buy of a couple bucks or a couple $100 or otherwise, and Coinbase makes it very easy. I have a weekly buy that goes in every week. I buy a little bit more. It's becoming less valuable every time it buys because Bitcoin just keeps racing up into the right. Yeah. But yeah.
But I mean, I would keep just a little bit of reserve just in case Bitcoin has a massive drop.
Right, and then you can buy the dip.
Just buy the dip.
Buy the dip.
And you'll be very happy you bought the dip.
So you don't recommend spending $1,000 if I were to spend $1,000 to diversify and buy, like, say, 33% on Bitcoin, 33% on Ethereum, 33% on Litecoin, or just
that's not a bad move. That's actually exactly what I told my parents to do. Believe it or not. Okay. So that's exactly what I told them. As I've learned more about the space, I believe that Bitcoin has the bigger upside. Well, I don't know about the bigger upside. I don't, this price wise, I try not to get into because there's no way to predict, right? We cannot know the future. And there's no way to predict whether Ethereum's going to win or Bitcoin's going to win. But by tech wise, I think that Bitcoin has the best tech of all of them. And it has the smartest developers on the planet working on it. The smartest hackers, the smartest developers, the smartest guys in the room that have decided to quit their job and go do something interesting.
So it's kind of interesting because you're less technical than I am.
Absolutely.
And you're saying you would go for Bitcoin for the tech reasons.
I do, yes.
And I'm actually going to say that I would go for Bitcoin for the brand image reason.
Okay.
Because it's got a better brand image. People recognize it more than they recognize Litecoin, than they recognize Ethereum, than they recognize other coins, right? So at that point, there is something to be said about brand recognition, right? People don't even think about certain things, they just buy that brand.
Absolutely. And that's the network effect. Yeah. And Trace Mayer talks about that. He says there are 7 network effects. We're in the first one, which is speculation. Right. Eventually you get consumer adoption and it just goes along that line of becoming, eventually ends up being the reserve currency of the world, and that's where he sees it.
Well, that would be very nice.
That'd be very nice for my investment, that's for sure.
So like $1,000 if you of Bitcoins in 2012 is worth about 8.5 million today.
Yeah, that's true. Right. Now, okay, so I want to address this because people will say this stuff. I had a friend the other day. He's like, "Oh man, if I'd only bought Bitcoin in 2010, I'd have $100 million." I'm like, "That's great. Were you one of 6,000 cypherpunks on the planet?" No, you weren't. Okay, then you didn't know what Bitcoin was. You never heard of it. You would have never heard of it. You might have heard of it in 2013 when it went up to about 1,000, and you might have heard it again lately. And certainly now, I mean, it's everywhere right now. Right?
So
everybody's hearing about it. Everybody's talking about it. So you hear about it now. But don't kick yourself for not buying in 2010. Like I said, if you weren't one of, if you weren't Hal Finney or Nick Szabo or Satoshi himself, you probably weren't tuned into this.
So here's the thing: if you see Bitcoin and you see yourself being worth 100 million, you know in your heart that you're not really worth 100 million. The whole thing is you can't sell all that Bitcoin in one lump sum and get 100 million without moving the entire market.
Right.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Say if I wanted to sell $1 million worth of Bitcoin,
$1 million.
$1 million? You can do that.
That's okay.
No problem.
Yeah.
or like 10 million.
Probably still be okay.
That would take a
You're
longer
trying to sell.
amount of time.
You're talking about selling back to USD because moving it, no problem. But
Selling
you're
to
talking about
USD,
selling USD.
yeah. How about 50 million?
That would take time, right?
Yeah, because you're dealing with traditional banking again.
It depends. If you
3
want
days or more than
No.
2 days?
It would take time to actually get the best price because you don't want to. If you're selling it, you don't want to actually affect the price too much by selling it. So you'll sell a little bit,
50
a little
million,
bit.
though? I don't know. With $200 billion, it would. I don't know how much it would move it. Honestly, I mean,
Well, 50 million that would definitely cause a spike down.
Let's see.
Yeah, that would definitely cause a spike down.
It'd be like what 5,000 Bitcoin, something like that.
Yeah. That's like a
that'd
sell
be a
wall.
lot. Yeah, I mean, if you look
that's
at,
nothing.
And you can go on GDAX and you can look at the trading view and you can look at the buy walls and sell walls, which the great thing about Bitcoin it is turning the youth into day traders. Not day traders. They're looking at they're using analysis. They're using trading analysis in a way they never had before. TradingView.com is a website that is like a Twitter for graphs and charts, and people are learning what a cup and handle are. They're learning about shoulder patterns, all these things in finance that were of the esoteric trader, 2 years ago.
Hey,
and now
we
I
don't
got
have to read the balance sheet and a financial statement now.
And now you got 15-year-old kids like, oh man, you see this cup and handle coming up on Reddit? Like, check it out, bro. It's crazy what it has done to people in the world. It has turned people into financial gurus, economists. They're reading.
But you could also see things.
Anyway, I get very excited about this stuff. I think it is changing the world in a lot of ways, other than just people making money.
No, I think it is changing the world in that it's the first time you can actually see the order book. So usually, in any exchange,
absolutely.
you cannot
Yeah.
tell if there's one guy with a huge amount of bitcoins.
Unless you had a Bloomberg station and your company paid $20,000 for it. Now you can go look at the order book. There's 10 different exchanges that are open. You're sitting right there. It's all open. It's beautiful.
Let me ask you guys a question. I'm just thinking about when you buy stock and shares, you have limits. Mm-hmm. So when you sell that, can you actually set your price and things like that, or is it that simple?
Yeah, depending on the site.
Depends what you want to do, right? I mean, let's say that you bought a whole bunch of stock in a lightly traded company, right? And on Friday at 3:50,
right? Yeah.
Just before the market closes on Eastern Standard Time, you sold a whole bunch of shares. You will move that market, and that's something people call slamming the door shut.
Right. But in answer to your question about can you do that with Bitcoin? Yes, you absolutely can. You can do it on GDAX. You can't do it on Coinbase Direct site. They actually, if you look at the buy and sell price on Coinbase at any given time, there's usually almost a $200 split. So if you want to sell your Bitcoin or buy Bitcoin at the same time, there's usually a $200 split. And they do that for a reason. I mean, Coinbase is pretty incredible. Like, people want to give it, a bad name for a number of reasons, but I will say, in terms of the fact that they've been handling influx of millions of people in a 2-week period, and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin trading hands every day. I give Brian Armstrong a lot of credit. People want to give Brian Armstrong a bad name, but he really has done. They have really done an incredible job of making it as easy as possible.
It's the easiest place to get Bitcoin. It
used to be really difficult to do this. Ask the people back in the Mt. Gox days, or even prior to that, it was almost impossible. Now it's easy. It's just as easy as opening an email, really. I mean, you give a little bit of bank information and you sign up and you can buy your first Bitcoin. Boom. Now, if you want to set limits, you want to set buy orders and that kind of thing, you can do that on GDAX. You can definitely do it on Gemini. You can do it on Kraken. It makes things very easy on those different websites. But on the Coinbase proper, no, you cannot set limits and set buy orders and things.
So it's been really annoying because people are using bots to buy shares and even Snickers. I mean, like, you want to buy a pair of cakes, someone would outbid you because you're using a bot to do that.
like on eBay or something?
Yeah, on eBay, right?
Yeah, sure.
Or like those little special cakes that everybody wants.
But it used to be that only the Wall Street guys who were right next to the actual exchange, and they paid millions of dollars for this being 10 feet next to the server.
Yeah, the old there was a real estate war back in Wall Street where people were buying up all the property around the exchange because they knew they could get closer, and any fraction of a second, nanosecond worth of time, they could buy up. They could get that faster. So what did Wall Street do? They built a building for your servers, and in that building there is a server for you and you and you, and every single one has the exact same length of cord that goes from, or I should say, fiber wire piece of fiber that goes from your data to the actual exchange, and now nobody has an advantage. But
well, even still, I mean, even with that, so getting back to the bot thing,
sorry,
there are
I digress.
90% of all Wall Street trades are by bots,
right?
Believe it or not.
Yeah, and that's why these flash crashes happen and these sort of things. It's only going to continue, right? The AI is only going to get smarter.
Yeah, can we use AI bots?
Oh yeah,
definitely.
People are doing it for sure.
For
with
Bitcoin?
Bitcoin.
For sure.
Yeah.
But other people have AI bots too, so you can't manipulate the price up and down.
We all got AI bots.
You guys have AI bots.
We're in the future. We're there.
Where can we make an AI bot to buy
Probably
Bitcoin?
on GitHub. Go to GitHub and talk to some people that'll help you out.
Hire some 10-year-old guy.
Yep, talk to some geeks, and they'll be like, "Sure, here's your bot. That's $10,000."
Hey, I went with my nephew to Target the other day, and he was like, "Oh, I wanted to learn how to code and make a robot." And he's like 7 years old. And then he saw a picture of a box, and he was like, "The robot has hands. Oh my gosh, the robot's gonna do my work for me. So I'm gonna build a box."
There you go. That's an enterprising young man right
Good
there.
man.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna take him to code. So let's talk about forecasting. I know you guys are not giving professional advice at all, and we're just gonna do this a little bit for fun. So how much do you think Bitcoin would go up
So everyone's got
this year in the next 5 years?
So everyone's got their own
5 years. Wow,
their own targets, I guess.
5 years is tough.
So I like to first throw out this guy John McAfee, who basically
he just doubled down.
who basically just said that, hey, look, he's got a particular price target, and
He does, and he's going to.
I think his was $1 million or something.
So it was five. So this summer it was 500,000. He said he would. I don't know if I can say this on the radio. He, no, I can't say it on the radio. He would do something. Yeah, we'd do something very aggressive as a bet for what happened this summer. So it was 500,000, but just this week.
Yeah, he upped his target to $1 million in I think 2 years, something like that.
By 2020. So he said that he was going to. So his bet was 500,000 originally. He said 500,000 by 2020.
2020.
And for those who don't know, John McAfee, the creator of McAfee virus protection, bit eccentric, may have murdered somebody in Colombia, who knows? But or wherever it was. I don't know if it was Colombia, but
he's
anyway.
very odd, but he's also pretty smart.
But he's very, very smart, and he was very smart when it came to antivirus. But his prediction is 500. It was 500,000 by 2020, and then this week he said, I thought it was going to be 5,000 by the end of 2017. It's now 11,000. So my timeline has shifted left. I'm saying it's going to be worth $1 million by 2020, and that's his prediction. Mike Novogratz, who's a very well-respected hedge fund manager, just came out last week on CNBC and said it's going to be worth between $40,000 and $50,000 on by the end of next year. I'm sort of on the line with that. Back in October, I said it was going to be 10,000 by February. We've already hit that.
I was thinking it was going to be 10,000 by the end of the year, and I was pleasantly surprised.
By a month.
When it happened like a month earlier. So.
And I made a bet with a friend of mine that it was going to be 10. I sort of slow played him, but I said it was going to be 10,000 by next October. I bet him a Bitcoin. He didn't take that bet, unfortunately. But yeah, so it's. I think that, again, I go back to the S-curve adoption. This is a new technology, and it is going to grow like a new technology, I think. And you're not going to see that. You're going to definitely see, like I said, price swings. When I tell friends I buy in, they're like, okay, what now? And it's like, okay, look, you're going to see some red numbers for a while. It's very possible. You might get lucky. You might have bought in at the right exact moment at the bottom, and it's going to go up to the right. But that never happens. It doesn't happen in stocks. It hasn't happened ever. Ray Dalio, who's a very smart investor, he owns the largest hedge fund in the world. I think they have $165 billion under management now. And I want to touch on this a little bit. He talks about non-correlated or uncorrelated assets, right? So for him, his big breakthrough was I'm going to buy a bunch of things that I think are going to raise by, let's just say 10%, right? So
Sure.
I'm going to buy 10 things that are all going to go up by 10%. And you can have expectation of 10% and 10% up, 10% down. But if they're non-correlated, you actually remove about 80% of the risk, the downside risk, which is an incredible feat, especially in the stock market. So what I mean by non-correlated risk would be like, I'm going to buy Google stock and I'm going to buy a timber yard in Colorado. You know, those things have nothing to do with each other for the most part. They're as non-correlated as they can be. And so we're going to invest in those two things. And if one goes up by 10%, the other goes down by 10%. The other one won't force this one to go down by 10% at the same time. So I'll cut my losses, but get the same expected value of gains on the other side. Bitcoin, I think, is that new non-correlated asset in a lot of ways. It has to do a little bit with our general economy, but
it has an anti-correlation to certain things.
It has anti-correlation, and a lot of people believe that, you know, when that next stock market crash comes, you're going to see Bitcoin price soar. I happen to be in that camp, and I think we've been waiting for that for a long time.
Why do you think it's that? I mean, do you think it's just an escape mechanism, or do you think it's a rebellion toward the government?
Well, if you've seen, you know, if we treat it like digital gold, which is definitely one of the use cases,
Yep.
You look at all the stock market crashes in the past.
Yep.
Generally speaking, gold goes up when everything else goes down. Bitcoin is digital gold, so. You know,
gold,
from that you know, historical
Bitcoin is
perspective,
better than digital gold.
Absolutely better. Oh, absolutely. No.
I think that's just a
I mean,
metaphor.
we kind of met, you know, that one use case of digital gold. I mean, there's this, you know, Rootstock is another one which they're going to put onto. Rootstock is a protocol they're going to put onto Bitcoin, hopefully, which allows for smart contracts and will help it compete more with things like Ethereum and other things. But
I think the fact of the matter is that if you're in, so I don't put this in if you're in the United States, it's not a problem. If you're in a place like Cyprus and you had your whole life savings in the bank, and then suddenly you found out that they had this thing called a bank holiday, which is not a good thing. It basically means your money got frozen, and the government is only allowing you access to a piece of that money, like $50 a day. That's not a good thing because you have to pay rent, right? You have to.
Absolutely.
You're not going to be able to pay rent with $50 a day. It's just not going to happen.
I really don't like bank holes. They just drive me crazy.
Well, $50 a day, just not in Silicon Valley. You know, if you're
right. But the other aspect of it is that if you had taken out your money and put it into the bank because you know you wanted it to be safe, and it was your retirement money and all that, suddenly you not only had this bank holiday, you had this seizure, right? So where they took a whole bunch of money from you. If you had over $100,000, they said, "Nope, sorry, that's gone." You know, it's like that South Park bank episode. Oop, it's gone. Yep. Sorry, you know.
Oh, and it's gone. Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
So we have about 4 minutes, and I wanted to ask you guys.
Oh my god. Okay.
I wanted to ask you guys, like, what do you think is the most important advice that you have provided on the show today?
Wow.
Yeah.
You tell me, Michelle. Yeah.
Well, it requires a little bit of self-reflection, but
Okay.
of course it's free will, and you can say whatever you want.
I think, for myself, I think the most useful thing you can come away from today is buy yourself your first Bitcoin. You know, some Bitcoin. Now, you don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. Like you said, you can buy a very, very small amount. You can buy $50 if you want, but buy your first Bitcoin. You then have a seat at the table in a way, and it also gives you incentive to learn more about it, because I really do think the more people understand and learn and know about Bitcoin, the more that we as a civilization will move forward. I think that, you know, us in this planet, I think it really has woken me up about what money is, and it's brought me down this rabbit hole that of things that I should have known. You know,
no, you shouldn't have.
Well, maybe I should have known, but like there are some things.
Nobody talks about it.
Right, you're absolutely right. We don't talk about money. We don't talk about finance. We don't have a good education of those things in this world. And you know, I went to a decent school, and you know, I'm a decently educated human being, and yet I had no clue about this stuff. And going into Bitcoin has given me a whole new vocabulary, a new understanding, a deeper understanding of politics, of economics, of society. I know that sounds crazy to people who haven't gotten into Bitcoin yet, but it really is true. And you'll find some of the deepest thinkers. You know, Naval is a guy that I follow on Twitter. He's the Angel List, early investor in Uber and Twitter. He is one of my favorite follows on Twitter. He is really bright, very wise thinker. And again, these are people I would have never encountered had I not gotten into this. And it really has made me, you know, so again, my advice, buy a little bit of Bitcoin. It will send you into a world that you'll start to understand stuff and look into it. If you're a curious human being. If you're not a curious human being, you know, buy some Bitcoin and then you'll be a little bit richer in the future.
So I think I have two key points. The first key point is I think that I think that Bitcoin is the next internet, right? It's except for money, right? And if you think
Or
that
it's the future of money.
it's a future of money, right? So if you think that you wanted to be invested in the internet when it was just starting out, maybe you might
Sure.
want to look at that for Bitcoin, and it'll have the same volatility characteristics, right? It'll be highly volatile. The other most important thing I said is that I am not a financial analyst.
And John Silvestro is not either. He is a marine pilot aviator. He has nothing to do with financial investments, other than Luna Capital. So, Luna Capital.
So there you go.
I just want to thank you guys for being here again. That's Tony San and John Silvestro. We're just talking about Bitcoin basics. I think in the evening, this show will be repeated again for the European audience and the people from other parts of the world. So I just wanted to thank you guys.
Thank you, Michelle. This is a blast.
Yeah, it was fun talking to you.
This is fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.